Hello, everybody. Dave Neal here, stand-up comic host of Bachelor Nation News, and we have a pretty fascinating clip to share with you from Nick Viall's podcast where he says he has receipts that he saw from Nayte's phone, I'm assuming, from text messages that prove that Nayte was the sort of guy that was in the right in the breakup between Nayte and Michelle. And of course, it's always way more complicated than that, but we're going to hear what Nick has to say about the fallout there. And this is just one of those sort of like stories that has pretty much died down from months ago, but we never really got any resolution. And now we're having Nick not spill the beans, but insinuate that Nayte was in the right. Follow me on Instagram at DNeals, patreon.com/Dave Neal for behind the scenes bonus content. I just shared some clips from the behind the scenes of my stand-up show with Katie Thurston. I shared that with the Patreon. If you want to check that out, patreon.com/Dave Neal. There's some real fun moments. It was very documentary style. We had the green room, the backstage shots. You can see Katie's entrance onto the stage and all that, plus every afternoon Bachelor Rush Hour, the podcast. Okay, so let's listen to this clip where they discuss Michelle and Nayte, and we'll read between the lines, as it were.
Or exes. Michelle commented on a couple different guys. She said that she actually wanted to send Clayton home earlier on her season, but wasn't allowed to.
Ooh.
So I thought that was interesting.
Kind of no shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, wait, you know that?
Duh. Wait, she wasn't in the
Clayton?
Clayton?
The man who came in 8th, who got sent home on his one-on-one, right?
I was gonna say, like, in a museum. It was like a boring museum day.
So of course the assumption there is Clayton was kept around because they wanted to groom him for the next Bachelor, and Michelle wasn't really into him, and of course they joke because that's pretty common on every season that happens.
Kids or something.
You took him on a date just to send him home.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we know. All right, anyway.
And she also spoke about Nayte and their relationship ending. She said it was my dream ring. Apparently that was her dream ring.
Wow.
She loved the like pear shape, and she was saying for future engagements she's going to have to figure out a new ring because she's not going to be doing a repeat.
She can't get a dream ring again?
Ring.
Would you want one that looked exactly the same?
I'm just surprised it was...
That she got her dream ring through Neal Lane?
I mean,
And they
Neal's
ripped
wonderful.
it back out of her hands.
Yeah.
Neal Lane ripped it back out.
What else she
How much control do you have over the rings?
Not much. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. She said, I wanted the relationship to work. I was willing to put in the work for the relationship, and I had the person take off.
Ooh.
That's not something that I bluntly said before because Instagram and there's all these other things but I know what it looks like to work through a relationship, and I know how hard relationships can get. But both people have to be capable of doing that.
Those are harsh words.
Those are harsh words. But also what everyone was screaming and telling her entire season with Nayte.
Mm-hmm.
That he wasn't emotionally mature. He had never been in a relationship before. He didn't know what it meant to be in a difficult place.
Yeah, I don't know, but
So now we're going to hear from Nick, who he hears the harsh words from Michelle that Nayte took off, and maybe Nayte did take off, but why did he take off?
we had the pleasure of talking with Nayte. I also had the pleasure of talking with Nayte
Solo, yeah.
And on the show, and Nayte was very generous with his truth.
Right. I remember the headlines coming from that.
Generous
yeah.
with his truth.
I mean, like, everyone has their... And they didn't work out, so clearly they weren't on the same page. I think... I know Nayte felt like he survived that relationship.
Wow.
And I don't think I'm not overselling that. I'm underselling it. Yeah.
Jeez. But does he have anything to compare that to? He was never in a relationship before.
I don't think you need to compare it to
feel like you survived something.
Knowing what happened.
Wow.
Whoa. Nick says knowing what happened. So we don't know. We're just a bunch of plebeian Roman township, towners here. So we don't know what went down. But Nick said Nayte said he survived the relation. Nayte's a survivor. I'm a survivor. What could possibly have happened that Nayte survived a relationship? And was it because of Michelle, or was it because of the scrutiny of other people? But it looks like Nick's about to place that blame on Michelle.
Wow.
And the shit that went down in that relationship.
Oh my God.
And Nayte shared some of it, but like that was tip of the iceberg type of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tip of the iceberg type of stuff right there. So what do you guys think? audience, my fine power listeners out there, what do you guys think? I mean, yeah, they broke up. Of course, he was living in Texas. She was Minnesota, wanted to buy a home. Did he feel like he quit his job for her and he was going to move for her and all these other things? What could have happened where he feels like he had to end, it was so bad he had to end it when their on-screen love was so strong? What the hell went down after the show ended?
And I think...
So Nayte for Bachelor now? Is that what you're saying? Maybe.
I think Nate's a plus person. I've gotten to know him. I think he's a real genuine, down-to-earth guy, and I think he really cared about Michelle, and I think he was really in love with her, and I think he truly busted his ass to try to make that relationship work. Wow. And then I think he felt like he had no choice. It was either his mental health and his well-being or that relationship.
Wow. Let's get him on Paradise.
So
yeah, I mean, this is fascinating stuff. This fell through the cracks. This is from Nick's episode Bachelor Recap with Julia Cunningham. Go listen to the full thing. It's from 6 days ago. But fascinating stuff here that Nick saying Nayte did everything he could to make it work. As we know, Nayte was on the podcast. Let's see here. Nayte was on the podcast. I'm trying to go back to where the interview started. Just how long ago was this? 5 months ago.
Whoever reached out to him, my Instagram profile, and she DMs me and is like, hey, you have 2 days to apply before we close this. And I didn't reply to her because I was like, there's
now Nayte gets called the F-boy, and he says here, I'm not an F-boy. And it's kind of sad. I mean, for the most part, he's was at least initially accused of being an F-boy because he's 6'6" and gorgeous looking. I mean, for the most part, you see a guy and you go, oh, that guy's trouble. And we understand because he's a catch, at least physically speaking, the first thing we notice about him. He seemed to be great on the show. He didn't panic or ruminate or have any of those things. Michelle chose him. And then the question everyone asked was, did Michelle choose the guy she would have dreamt to be with, like her knight in shining armor, and versus was there a guy on the show that was a more realistic match? And you never know the answer to these things. The show never works out.
I do feel like that's the root of so many relationships ending is the one person being like, we can fight through this, don't give up on me, and the other person being like, no, enough is enough.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was just like it all depends. If you're again if you want to fight for a relationship, that's awesome, but you can't be the one being the reason why
he's what's happening right here. Nick's not having a stroke, guys. What's happening here is he's thinking about all the things he knows and he's trying to not say what he knows. So if you don't mind, let's zoom in on his face and try to read his mind. Okay.
If you want to fight for a relationship, that's awesome, but you can't be the one.
Blink twice. Tell us.
Being the reason why there's so much to fight for, so to speak.
About.
Yeah.
What the hell is that? And again, I'm not blaming Nick. He is literally walking the fine line of telling us what he knows. My DMs are open. You can tell me, Nick. I won't tell anyone. Fingers crossed. Okay, double erases. I have, okay, whatever. So very fascinating stuff. Now, of course, his producers are going to push back and say, well, maybe you only heard one side of the story.
Yeah.
Anyways, strong words by Michelle.
Strong words.
Michelle was so polished throughout the entirety of her season.
Anymore. Yeah.
And well, I think there's a part of her that maybe just wants to be a little bit more raw and honest. And I can totally imagine how, from her perspective, it was these were little things to her that you could survive, and she must have felt really abandoned and walked out on. Versus from Nate's perspective, he's like, I know this is not a healthy place at all for me.
I know too much. There's no way to interpret it as well, they could have this interpretation, and they could, it's just
okay, Nick says he knows too much. Comment below. What does Nick know? Scotty doesn't know that Fiona.
Do you talk to Michelle the same kind of in-depth?
No, but I saw receipts.
Okay.
Anyway, I could be wrong. You're right. I wasn't there. I could be wrong.
So yes, that's true. You weren't there. You could be wrong. This isn't the court of law, but Nick did see receipts. And of course, we're not here to press Michelle to share her side. If she wanted to, she could. But it's a fascinating conversation. The old who was on the right side of a breakup. It's a tale as old as time. Now, normally we're in breakups and we only have a small mutual friend group. So you try to shit talk your ex. I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe you're civilized. But some people will try to jockey themselves to play the winner of that. But of course, with Bachelor Nation, you see audiences getting on one side or the other. And, you know, for the most part, everyone was on Michelle's side. They saw Nayte as a certain type of guy, which I don't think is fair at all. And it's like, not to say Michelle's not a great person. It's not to say that at all. But just because Michelle's a teacher of employment doesn't make her of like greater moral fiber than Nayte might have been. You know what I mean? So like, we have to not treat Michelle with kid gloves. What the heck could have happened? It reminds me of Rachel and Tino, where there was clearly before there was an admitted kiss that was shared between Tino and another lady, of course, which led to their breakup. Before that, something must have gone down with Rachel, and it could have just been the scrutiny of being in the public limelight. As we know, with like past leads like Katie Thurston, there's a hell of a lot of work that needs to go down to recover from the scrutiny you face being on the show. So we don't know if maybe Michelle got it extra hard by trying to put it this way: you can't possibly understand what it's like to be the lead on the show, especially when you're one of the few leads of color that has to deal with representing treating your time on the show as finding love, but also knowing that you're representing a group of people. If you're Clayton on the show, no, he's never like, oh, I represent white people. I need no. But when you're coming from a place where you've been underserved, because we've had only 2 other leads of color before that, then there's all these other aspects of like making it work. It was the first relationship that was a black lead chose a black contestant, and that came with a heaviness I couldn't possibly know. I have the privilege of not understanding the weight that would go into that. Where a failed relationship, when everyone's rooting for you, what does that do to you? All these questions we ask, we don't have the answer to, respectfully. But interesting for Nick to say there's no way to misread what went down. I saw the receipts. And of course, kudos on the producers for pushing back on that. He says, yeah, I could be wrong, but I saw what I saw. And it's like, what did you see, Nick? Tell us what you saw.
I want a reunion show after that you should be hosting. Yeah. All of like Love is Blind. Like,
let Nick Viall host the reunion show. Well, let me know what you guys think. I secretly, this is just one of those President's Day specials, 22% off. This is one of those just stories that fell through the cracks, as things do, and we're just catching up with it right now. Very fascinating stuff. I'd love to know your thoughts. Don't forget extra bonus content on the Patreon. If you enjoy what we do over here, I have to let you know that one of our revenue streams is a private membership community. It helps me make content full-time. It helps me get all the gear and equipment and all the infrastructure I need to continue giving you guys daily content. If you don't want to join the Patreon, that's totally fair. I ask that you maybe check out the podcast, Bachelor Rush Hour, a top 10 entertainment news podcast, all the day's clips compiled into short bite-sized content for you. And we had a lot coming up in the near future, going to be on a lot of big podcasts. So we're definitely going to be growing that thing. And I appreciate everyone who's joined me from the beginning. All right, more content coming your way. Live streaming 7 p.m. tonight, before and after the East Coast episode of The Bachelor. We'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.